Prologue. Berlin, Germany, 1945. The city lay in ruins, a ghostly reminder of the devastation that World War II had wrought. Buildings stood half destroyed, streets were filled with rubble, and the air was thick with the smell of smoke and decay. Amid the desolation, survivors roamed like shadows, searching for food, shelter, and lost loved ones. In this shattered landscape, Thomas Bauer, a former German soldier, wandered aimlessly. The war had ended, but the battles within his mind had not. He had seen horrors that words could not describe, and the weight of guilt and loss hung heavy on his soul. He stumbled upon a half-destroyed library, its doors hanging off their hinges, and decided to take shelter there for the night. As he rummaged through the remnants of books and manuscripts, Thomas found a tattered volume titled The Cyanide Bible. Intrigued and desperate for answers, he tucked it under his arm and settled into a corner to read. Chapter 1. The Aftermath of War. Berlin, Germany, 1945. The Cyanide Bible's pages were filled with dark, nihilistic teachings that seemed to resonate with Thomas's own disillusionment. Each passage spoke of a world devoid of hope, where traditional beliefs crumbled under the weight of reality. Thomas read late into the night, drawn deeper into its grim philosophy. He recalled the cyanide pills he had seen during the war, tiny, deadly capsules used by soldiers and spies to avoid capture. The parallel was unmistakable. The book was a poison, not in the literal sense, but in the way it eroded the spirit, much like the pills destroyed the body. The Cyanide Bible offered a form of intellectual and spiritual suicide, leading its readers into an abyss of despair. Chapter 2. The Spread of Existentialism. Paris, France, 1930s-1940s. Long before the war's end, Europe had been a breeding ground for existentialist thought. The trauma of World War I had already sown seeds of disillusionment, and the intellectual elite were grappling with the meaning of life in a seemingly indifferent universe. Jean-Paul Sartre and Albert Camus emerged as leading voices of existentialism. Their writings, filled with notions of absurdity, freedom, and responsibility, resonated deeply with a generation scarred by conflict. Cafes in Paris buzzed with debates about the nature of existence, the absence of God, and the search for meaning in a chaotic world. Sartre's Being and Nothingness and Camus' The Stranger became touchstones for those seeking to understand their place in a post-war society. These works, although philosophical in nature, offered solace to many who felt adrift in a sea of despair. Chapter 3. Disillusioned Believers. Various locations. 1940s. Thomas read the Cyanide Bible with a mixture of fascination and horror. It spoke of a world without hope, where traditional beliefs crumbled under the weight of reality. Each page seemed to echo his own thoughts, his own doubts. As he read, he recalled stories of others who had lost their faith. There was Father Matthias, a chaplain he had met at the front, who had once been a beacon of hope for his comrades. But the endless slaughter and the cries of the dying had eroded his faith. One night, after a particularly brutal battle, Father Matthias simply walked into the no man's land and never returned. Then there was Greta, a nurse who had cared for the wounded with tireless compassion. She had been a devout Catholic, her faith sustaining her through the darkest hours. But when her fiancé was killed in an air raid, her prayers turned to ashes. She had left the church, unable to reconcile the idea of a benevolent God with the suffering she had witnessed. Chapter 4. Philosophical Confrontations. Post-war Europe, 1946. Determined to find answers, Thomas set out on a journey across Europe. He sought out intellectuals, theologians, and philosophers, hoping they could help him make sense of the Cyanide Bible and his own experiences. In Paris, he met with Jean-Paul Sartre. The philosopher's home was filled with books and manuscripts, a testament to his relentless pursuit of knowledge. Sartre listened to Thomas's story, nodding thoughtfully. The Cyanide Bible, Sartre mused, is a symptom of our times. It reflects the despair that follows when old certainties are shattered. But remember, despair is just the beginning. It is in recognizing our freedom and responsibility that we find the strength to create meaning in our lives. Thomas left Sartre's home with a glimmer of hope. His next stop was Rome, where he sought an audience with Pope Pius XII. The Pope, aged and weary, listened patiently as Thomas recounted his journey and the teachings of the Cyanide Bible. Faith is tested in times of great trial, the Pope said softly. It is easy to believe in times of peace and prosperity, but true faith endures even in the face of unimaginable suffering. The Cyanide Bible may speak of despair, but it also challenges us to find the light in the darkness. Chapter 5. Personal Journeys. Europe, 1946. Thomas continued his journey, meeting people from all walks of life who had been touched by the war. In a small village in Poland, he met Anna, a survivor of a concentration camp. Her eyes were haunted, but she spoke with quiet strength. "I lost my family, my home, everything," she said. "But I refuse to let the darkness consume me. Each day is a struggle, but it is also a gift." The Cyanide Bible may speak of despair, but we have the power to write our own stories. In London, Thomas encountered David, a British soldier who had fought in North Africa. David had turned to alcohol to numb the pain, but he had recently found solace in a support group for veterans. "We all carry our scars," David said, "but sharing our stories helps. It reminds us that we are not alone. The war tried to break us, but it also showed us the strength we have within." Chapter 6. Historical Encounters. Various locations. 1946. Thomas's journey brought him to various historical figures who had grappled with the same questions. In Vienna, he met Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor. Frankl's work on logotherapy emphasized the search for meaning even in the most harrowing circumstances. In the darkest moments, Frankl told Thomas, "We must find a reason to continue." The Cyanide Bible may preach despair, but our task is to find meaning despite it. That is our true challenge. In a monastery in the Swiss Alps, Thomas met Karl Barth, a prominent theologian. Barth's writings had influenced many during the war, and his faith remained unshaken. "The war tested our faith," Barth said, "but it also revealed its strength." The Cyanide Bible speaks to a crisis of belief, but it also challenges us to reaffirm our commitment to hope and love. Faith is not about avoiding suffering, it is about finding the strength to endure it. Chapter 7. Redemption and Reflection. Europe, 1946 to 1950s. As Thomas traveled, he began to understand that the Cyanide Bible was not an endpoint but a starting point. It forced those who read it to confront their deepest fears and doubts. But it also offered a choice, to succumb to despair or to find a new path to redemption. He returned to Berlin, carrying the lessons he had learned. He sought out Greta, the nurse he had known during the war. She was now working in a hospital, dedicating her life to helping others despite her loss of faith. "Your journey has shown me that we are not defined by our suffering," she told Thomas. "We are defined by how we choose to respond to it." The Cyanide Bible may have been written in despair, but we can write our own stories of hope. Together, they decided to destroy the Cyanide Bible, not as an act of denial, but as a symbol of their choice to seek light in the darkness. They gathered friends and survivors, and in a quiet ceremony, they burned the book. As the flames consumed the pages, Thomas felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The journey had been long and painful, but it had also been a journey of healing. He had found meaning not in the words of the Cyanide Bible, but in the resilience of the human spirit. Epilogue. The Lost Way. Berlin, 1950s. Years later, Thomas stood in the rebuilt streets of Berlin. The city was slowly healing, just as he had. He had dedicated his life to helping others find their own paths to redemption, inspired by the lessons he had learned. Yet, despite these personal triumphs, a deeper unease lingered. The Cyanide Bible was a memory, a cautionary tale about the dangers of losing faith. But it also left a haunting question. Had humanity truly found its way again? Or were we merely patching the cracks in our fractured souls? In the quiet moments of reflection, Thomas couldn't shake the feeling that society had lost its way. The wars had ended, but the indifference and cruelty they had fostered seemed to persist. Nations rebuilt, but the human spirit remained scarred. Why did we continually find more horrible ways to hurt each other? What was the point of all this suffering? Thomas thought about the cynical truth. War was a lucrative business. As he looked out over the bustling city, he wondered if the peace they had built was only temporary, a fragile illusion. War was profitable, and the forces that drove humanity to conflict seemed ever present, lurking beneath the surface.